everybody, it's Alyce-Kay Ruckelhaus and from Threshold of Hineni, and I'm here with a craft table talk, and you're looking at a lot of purple. And that's because I'm working on my Mother's Day present for my mom, and she loves purple. She would live in a purple house if my dad would let her. In fact, their house has some kind of purplish on it. Anyway, I'm working on a journal for her, obviously, and she likes to write a lot in her journals. So this one's not going to be as labor intensive because I want to leave a lot of writing space for her. I don't want to take it all up with pockets and stuff. There will be a few pockets because I have some special things, like this is a page from my first book that I wanted to include, and I really like these card type pockets that I've made, so I'm going to include those, and I'll probably include a note card probably inside the cover, and I'm not doing the cover today because Bill's picking up fabric for me. I am going to do some corners because I'm thinking that these would be really good. She writes a lot about scripture in her journal, so I was thinking she could write the verses on these little things, these corner pockets, corner texts. And mostly though, I'm going to be doing just pages and then also pages on top of pages. So I don't think I can get it all done on camera, but we'll see how far I can get. Anyway, I thought if I can be this coordinated, I'm not 100% sure, but I thought that if I could talk while I'm doing this, I tried to get as much done ahead of time as possible so that I'm not having to do a ton of thinking. And I thought that I would talk about my mom while I'm doing this. Not gossipy, but just, tell you some things about her. And I haven't really planned it out. I'm just going to tell you what comes to mind while I'm working. So it might not be what would come out if I were to interview her or something, which I thought about doing. It'll just be what comes to mind. I mean, it might not even be what I would have normally written about. And part of the reason why I decided to do this, it's practical, folks, is because I was going to make this newsletter about her, and I still am. But I was running out of, I'm even using purple scissors. I was running out of writing time and time to work on this journal, and it was coming down to it's going to be one or the other. And even though this isn't going to get to her in time for Mother's Day, I'm going to send it to her a little bit late. Even though it's not going to get to her in time for Mother's Day, I thought that if I made a video about it, that would be like the way to show her what she's getting. So that's what I'm doing. So anyway, about my mom, her name is Lynn Hanish, and if you've been reading my newsletter for very long, you know some things about her because I include a link to her journal every issue, which I know sounds a little funny if you're not used to this. My mom is walking across the U.S. for the second time, and, oops, I went zigzag, and prayer walking across the U.S. And so I always include a little update, which is mostly a link to her journal because she has a really great journal where she's not just writing about what she's seeing and doing and who she talks to and stuff, but also lots and lots and lots of pictures. Ow, ow. Of course, if I do something like that, I'm going to do it on camera, right? Anyway, so, I will have the link to that below, farther down in the newsletter, and you should check it out. There's more pictures than writing. It's fun to look at. So anyway, and I'll try to remember to talk, because this is a big deal, about why she's doing these walks and the other walks that she's done and everything, but kind of thought I'd start at the beginning, right? So, and this is my version of my mom's life. It's, what I remember as a kid, so it's kind of, probably a little distorted. Like I said, it's probably not what she would share if she were to write a biography or if I were to interview her, but it might be kind of fun. Anyway, I, of course, do not remember her being born, but she was born back in the early 40s. I think it's okay to say her age. She's 77. That's been in all kinds of articles and stuff. Her dad, at the time, had tuberculosis. And so he was in the hospital when she was born, and he passed away when she was 4 months old. And if I remember right, she said that he never got to hold her. My grandma was just able to show my mom to him through the window of because he was in like an iron lung thing. Because tuberculosis is very contagious. I don't know if you know even what tuberculosis is, because it doesn't really, I mean, it does exist still, but it's not very common. And Mom, just in case, well, hopefully you're watching this. I'm going to try to make sure that you do. What I did was I tried to pick things that you could write over for the most part, and I faded a lot of them out and everything, so they are, like light enough for you to write on. There are a few pages that I kept dark because they were just really cool that way, but I'm going to put some other things over them. And any that I do leave dark, you can cover with pictures and stuff if you want to. Just do whatever you want on them. Anyway, mostly though, it's going to be writable space for you. So, okay. Anyway, so my grandpa died when she was 4 months old, and then, since this is my mom's story, not my grandma's, I'm not going to go into all the details, although it is a really fun story, how my grandma met her second husband. But anyway, suffice to say, she remarried fairly quickly. I'm pretty sure she didn't know him before my grandpa died. And I know that there wasn't anything, scandalous going on or anything. They actually met at a Bible camp, and his son was my mom's family's pastor. My mom was still a baby. I think that they remarried that she remarried, I think my mom was less than a year old, but I could be wrong on that. Anyway, it's a really romantic story, and I'll try to remember to tell it some other time because it does influence some things in the Isaiah Cadre series. Anyway, so they had lived in Livermore, California, which is in Northern California, and when my grandma remarried, she moved the family to Visalia, to my grandpa's ranch. And so that was, that's the Central Valley, and that was a real change, a change in climate. I'm sure it was a change in friends for the kids and stuff. My mom was just a baby, so I don't think it made a huge difference to her. Although I know that she always wished that she could have met her dad, her biological dad. So she was raised with a stepdad, and my grandma had 5 children, 5 or 6. Let's see, there was Harley, there was Aunt Lois, there was Harley. I think my grandma had 6, and my grandpa, my mom's stepdad, had 5. But it might be the other way around. It might be that my grandma had 5 and he had 6, without stopping and counting them right now, which I don't want to bore you with. I'm not absolutely sure. But anyway, there were 11 kids, and she was the youngest. And some of them, my understanding is that they were already gone by the time that my grandma and grandpa got married. I think that some of Edgar's children, he had 12 kids, and I think that some of them might have been like older than my mom or close to her age. Anyway, so she grew up on a farm, and it was a tiny house, you guys. I mean, I used to think it was big when I was a kid, but it really wasn't very big. And I know that 2 or 3 of her brothers lived out in a cable car that was out in the yard. And so that's kind of cool. Anyway, my grandpa was kind of an evangelist, and he would go preach in the jail and stuff. But one of the things that he did was he would go along the road on Sundays looking for children who weren't in church and asked their parents if he could take them to church. And so my dad was one of those kids that he found. And see the chocolate kisses. My mom loves chocolate. I come by it honestly. My dad was one of the kids that my grandpa invited to come to church. And, you know, he asked his parents, of course, and everything. So I think my mom was 4 then. And so she grew up going to church with my dad. But I don't think that there was any romance, my understanding, although you know how these things kind of happen in people's hearts before it comes public. But my understanding is that their romance started when they were Mary and Joseph in the church's Christmas play. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, they were in high school, and I'm going to get all kinds of corrections from them, which is fine. I want the corrections, Mom and Dad, because I'm just like doing all this off the top of my head and not checking on details or anything. But anyway, so they were dating in high school, and I'm not really sure how many years they were dating in high school. But my dad graduated, I'm assuming, a couple years before my mom. Maybe he graduated just 1 year, because I think actually my mom may have graduated early. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, he went off to San Francisco State, and she followed. When she graduated, she came up there to be a secretary, and they got married, or I think she was a secretary. Oh, man, there's so many things that I thought I knew that I don't. Anyway, so they got married, and I came along almost exactly a year later. And anyway, they were living in San Francisco in the Haight-Ashbury district, and that was like at the beginning of the whole hippie movement. And I remember my dad saying that he had to knock drunks off the car so my mom could go to work. So yeah, anyway, you know, they weren't rich, which, you know, when you're in college and you're married and you have a kid, you're not rich. But they did fine. And then after my dad graduated, they moved to Visalia, which is where they were both from. How did I have this like that? Yeah, I think so. So they were both from Visalia, and so they moved down there. And I think my dad got a job auditing at a bank or something, but I'm not completely certain about that. Anyway, my parents were really, really involved in church. They were involved in the church that they grew up in first, Parkside Chapel, which was a Christian Missionary Alliance church. And then they, I really don't know why, but they decided to move to a Mennonite Brethren church. I'm not sure why, come to think of it, so they can fill me in on that. Anyway, they moved to Mennonite Brethren church, and I'm not sure. I remember when we started going there, but I don't know how old I was. I do remember that I had a white fluffy coat with black buttons. But my mom was really, really involved with Vacation Bible School. She was probably involved, I'm guessing, with like Sunday school or children's church or something else too. And I think she was involved with the women's ministry, because I remember a whole bunch of women coming to our house and I had to take a nap. And I remember being with her for some meetings. Where's the page I was going to do this on? There we go. I remember everybody drank iced tea, and which I thought they had sugar in it, and I thought that was really disgusting. I still do. I don't like sweet tea. I live in the South, and that's the thing here, but it's really disgusting. But anyway, so they had, and back then, you guys, they had iced tea spoons, these long-handled spoons that when you drank iced tea, I guess you used them for stirring your sugar in. I'm not really sure. Anyway, so yeah, so she was really involved in, I think, women's ministry, and she was also involved in VBS. And I'll tell about VBS in a moment, but I have to say, one of the things that I remember my mom doing a lot was fixing these wonderful chocolate ice cream sodas. They were so good with like chocolate syrup and milk and club soda and ice cream. Oh my word, they were so good. And we had these spoons that the handles were straws. They were metal. So they weren't, like your little cheapy things that little kids get. They were very, very cool. And come to think of it, I wonder how you washed those. Anyway, we didn't have a dishwasher. Everything was washed by hand. And anyway, so going back to VBS, Vacation Bible School, I will explain that because it was kind of funny. Last year was the first summer that we were living here in Tennessee, and Bill said, "What is VBS?" Because he's seeing all these signs, VBS is coming, and he thought it was a disease. You have to be like, Baptist or evangelical or something, I guess, to know what that is. So anyway, she was really involved in Vacation Bible School, in directing it, I think. I remember, I think I was too young to actually participate in it, but I got to go, because my mom was doing it. And I remember one time she decorated like a refrigerator box or something with Christmas lights that flashed. And people would go into it, and I'm not exactly sure what happened. My impression is that they turned into something else, but I know that couldn't have happened. So that's what, as a little kid, what I thought. But I don't know what the deal was with that. But I also remember that one year for VBS, they always divided the kids into teams, and they'd compete like for memory verses and how many guests they brought, and I think for the offering too, and stuff like that. And anyway, the winning team got to do something special, and the losing team had to go clean at the zoo. I always thought that was the best thing ever. I don't know if my mom came up with that idea or somebody else did, but it was great. So anyway, so she always did that stuff. And my mom's a leader, and so's my dad, but I'm talking about my mom. And she's really creative and stuff, so she would come up with all kinds of really cool, funky things. And that's just, how she's always been. And so anyway, so eventually my dad got a job with Lockheed as an internal auditor. And so we moved to Santa Clara, which is now Silicon Valley. Wasn't called it back then. Wasn't called Silicon Valley back then. I don't think Silicon was even an important thing at that time. But so we moved up there, and because we'd been going to a Mennonite church in Visalia, and I think because some of our friends had moved from Visalia to Santa Clara before us, and we're going to the Mennonite church there, Mennonite Brethren, we just immediately started going to that church. I don't think we did any church shopping or anything like that. I think we just immediately went to what was El Camino Mennonite Brethren Church at the time, and later became El Camino Bible Church. My parents were really, really involved in the leadership there. My dad was in, various board of trustees positions with the continent, I think the North American Board of Trustees, and like lots of other positions. And my mom, I think she directed VBS there. I don't remember for sure about that, but I know she was involved with it. And she was really heavily involved with children's church. I'm not sure if she directed that at some point or not. Our children's church was really awesome, you guys, because it was like grown-up church. So it was like kind of training. It wasn't like, I've been to so many churches where children's church is just, throw some crayons and paper at the kids, It's like babysitting, and it's not actually teaching the kids anything. And I know that a lot of churches have really good programs, but some of them, it's like that's all that they do, and I've been shocked because I grew up with such a great children's church program, but it was just like, you know, regular grown-up church. And so we had jobs, you know. Somebody did the offering, and they learned how to pass the offering baskets, and we sat in rows, we sang hymns, we had a sermon, and you know, and the kids were involved in leading it, not just the adults. The adults did things, but you know, like I remember doing flannel graph stories when I was in it, and you did that until like 5th or 6th grade, and then you graduated to big church, adult church, but the pastor and his wife had a workbook that they had written to help you adjust to adult church, and if you completed it, then you got to go on this pancake breakfast thing with them, which was just really special. And it was just really neat because I think that we were discipled into church, into being part of church. You know, it's like when I was in college, I read, oh dear, I cut off part of that, didn't I? When I was in college, I read that children who stay in church with their parents, this was like a study that was done in Australia, I think it was, but they found that children who stayed in church with their parents were more likely to go to church as adults. I mean, like way more likely to go to church as adults. But I think that the children's church program that we had, that I know my mom was part of running and coming up with and everything, I think that really trained kids to go to church as adults. And so I know a lot of my friends are still Christians and everything, and go to church and stuff. So where are we? We're at 22 minutes. Okay, so let me just do a couple of things in this, and then I'm going to start a new video. Yeah, so anyway, so she was involved in running that, and she was also heavily involved in what was called the Mary Martha group, which was like the ladies club kind of thing. It was like a service organization. I think she was like president or something when they did this cookbook that, oh shoot, I should have sorted these ahead of time. You know what, I'm going to stop let me just finish the story. I think she was in charge of this cookbook that they made, and this was before there were companies that did this. You know, she actually, like, I think she typed it and stuff. I mean, major work. And it was the Mary Martha cookbook, and I have a copy of it someplace. And I used to use it. I mean, it was the recipes that I grew up with in my church, so I used it quite a bit. And for those of you who know pumpkin crunch, it's from that. If you don't know it, oh my word, you're really missing out. That was one of my mom's recipes. Anyway, I'm going to start a new video, and first I'm going to do some sorting so I don't have to do that while I'm talking. All right, I love you all. Bye-bye.